Good afternoon and welcome to On Point, sponsored and hosted by Sutherland Institute. I'm Holly Richardson. I write the blog Holly on the Hill, and I'm a candidate for Ledge District 57. And I'm joined by State Senator Deidre Henderson, who represents Senate District 7 down in Spanish Fork and a bunch of other places. How many cities do you cover?
9.
9 cities, large district. So thank you for joining me. We are week 6. The week 6 started the legislative session. The pace is like really insane
It's
right
like
now.
Groundhog Day. I can't remember what day of the week it is.
What day of the week it is. Do you go for like 7 to midnight? It's feeling like it's about that point.
No, not yet. I mean,
7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah, I mean, well, me personally, yeah, it's midnight or beyond,
Yeah.
but not on the Hill. I'll get off the Hill mid-evening usually.
Yeah. Well, you had an opportunity to go somewhere this weekend that didn't have anything to do with Utah politics, and I'd love to have you tell me about that.
It was awesome. So my son, Jimmy, is in the American Leadership Academy show choir. American Leadership Academy is a charter school down in Spanish Fork. All 5 of my kids have gone to that school. Now my oldest daughter's graduated and up at USU. They have this fantastic show choir program directed by Rick Lunt, resident of Spanish Fork. And show choir, to people who don't know, is a lot of singing and dancing, and
Right.
It's just awesome. So there are no other competing show choirs in the state of Utah. So for these kids to have any competition, they got to go out of state. So we went to LA over the weekend, and they competed, and they actually won grand champion.
Wow.
At their competition, and it's a Fame Hollywood, the Fame event. There's 6 of them throughout the country, and then the winners of Fame go to compete in the national event in Chicago in April. And we competed against big schools. There were 5A, 4A schools from California.
And how big
Arizona.
is your school?
There were like 300-400 kids in their high school. The graduating class was less than 100 last year. So really, if you look at, there's 50 kids in our show choir, and it's probably more than 10% of the school
Wow.
is in the show choir.
Wow.
And so it's really impressive. We compete against these really incredible, wealthy schools, and our kids just brought it home. They did such a great job.
So tell me what their theme was.
Well, they did a Monsters Incorporated theme, and really it was about overcoming fear. So it's this really nice message that was in there. And looking at some of the other schools and their messages, there was a lot of, there were 2 whips. There were 2 schools who had girls with whips.
Oh, wow.
And
you would not see that in Utah.
Oh, no. And
Yeah.
I mean, really, I was so proud of our kids and proud of the fact that with their nice, clean message and their talent that they won. And it was just great. It was a proud moment for me. I was really, really excited that I was able to fly down there and spend the weekend there.
That's great. So your school got grand champion and your son got?
Oh, and my son, yes. My son got best male performer out of all the kids in the show choirs and all the different show choirs.
That really is awesome.
So yeah, it was great.
That's a lot of fun. That can segue into charter schools on a different topic, totally different topic.
Yeah.
So we mentioned, I think, one of our very first On Point discussions about ghost students, and that was before I think the audit had been officially released that you had requested. And I'd just love to have you talk about that, because it's something that's a big concern of mine, and I think of many people as they find out what's been going on.
Well, so when we talk about ghost students, and that's a term, I don't really know who coined that, how that got
I think
thrown
you
out
did,
there.
actually.
I'm sure I heard it from someone, but it's what it is homeschool students who are recruited by private companies to sign up with them. Then they recruited various different ways. So they maybe have a cash incentive that they give them. They give them reimbursements for educational supplies. They give them free curriculum, free mentors, things like that reach out to homeschool families. And then the homeschool families enroll or are assigned to a random charter school. And so charter schools who maybe are a little bit low on their enrollments, it seemed to like this pathway.
Do you think that all the charter schools knew what was going on when they were approached by the vendor?
I can't speak to what they did or did not know. I don't, from what I've seen, I don't know how you could look at this and not think that it smells bad, not think that it's a way of, really a form of misrepresentation. I'm trying to choose my words carefully here.
I've seen words you've used in the paper.
But these private companies assign these kids to charter schools, and then the charter schools count them as fully enrolled on their enrollments and get all of the money from the state for them keep a bunch of it for themselves, give some of it to the private company, and then never interact with that student. Even there's a private school, at least one private school that I'm made aware of now that does this as well. It partners with Harmony to assign their private school students to charter schools so that they can get public money for their private school students, so the private school students don't have to pay the tuition.
Wow.
And you know,
There's at least one district school involved as well.
Provo East School has been involved in this. I've heard from them since the audit came out, and they say that they're fixing the problems that were pointed out in the audit. And not all of these schools do it the exact same way. There's a lot of different variations of how this is done. So maybe there might be some schools that do it more egregiously than others. So Provo East School, the Provo superintendent did email me and let me know that they've addressed their problems, and and they're working on getting on the up and up there.
So I've heard some concerns that all charter schools are like this, or all distance education programs are like this, because there's a distance ed component as well. Right? They're telling
Absolutely.
people that you're supposed to be offering these classes or whatever to these students who are on the rolls. They're doing some kind of distance ed, and I know for me, I want to make sure that people understand that this is not something that's across the board with charter schools or with distance ed schools.
Yeah, let's be clear. Online learning is not the problem.
Right.
That's not the issue. Online education is not the issue. That is a fundamental component of our diverse, choice-filled education system here in Utah. It's healthy, it's good.
Right.
My kids go to a charter school. I used to homeschool my children. They've been in district schools. I think choice is a very important thing to maintain in our education system here in the state. So, but let's make sure we do it the right way. So if you've got a homeschool student who signs up directly to an online provider, who is, I guess, certified with the state, and they sign up for 3 credit hours, say, that online school gets funding for 3 credit hours from the state, not the whole thing.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the problem, is you've got some students who may not be really enrolled full-time or taking full-time accredited classes, but who are being counted as full-time, and the money is being distributed between charter schools and some of these private companies who are making hand over fist, tons of money.
My understanding was the fees to the charter schools were the bulk of the money that came from the WPU from the state. So the charter school would keep a little bit. The vendors got the
About
bulk
80%.
of it.
From the audit, on average, it's about 80% that goes to the private companies, and the charter schools keep about 20%.
I think that's outrageous.
It is absolutely
It's just outrageous. And then there's a little bit of kickback then to the families who
Yes.
who were presented with the idea of, hey, here's a way that the
Yes.
state wants to help you
Right.
pay for your kids' education and get you an iPad or technology or whatever it is.
See, and I wonder if those incentives weren't there, that those recruitment incentives weren't there, money wasn't given to the families, they weren't offered free services. If this was purely market driven, if those families would actually pay for the services offered by these private companies, I wonder if they would.
I suspect not. Right? I mean, I really don't think that they would. And it's frustrating to me as a charter school supporter and a parent to find out that education dollars are being misused this way. They're such a finite resource, and we're already underfunded, and then to find out that somebody's gaming the system like this, what's the solution?
There's a lot of solutions. I mean, it's not going to be a one fix solution. I'm waiting for some more information. We're going to be digging deep into this issue. I've got a bill. I'm sponsoring a bill that would prohibit schools from using private companies to enroll or recruit students. So you can't use them, you can't pay for them, because some of these are charging a head fee for every student that they, on top of everything.
Right.
And so my bill will address that. We'll be hearing that bill sometime this week in my Revenue and Taxation Committee.
What are some of the other things that you can do to look at?
Well,
how to
clearly
fix
there
this?
needs to be some rule changes with the state Board of Education, with the charter school board, because the rules that are in place that talk about what does it mean to be a full-time student, the 10-day rule and all these things, they're just not adequate for online learning. And I think that I've talked to members of both of those boards, and they understand this problem. They totally get that there needs to be some modification, some modernization of their board rules to address these situations, and that will happen. If there is talk of, in the audit it talked about some schools or some of these companies giving inducements for students to stay until after the October 1st deadline and then letting them drop out. I mean, if that really is going on, if there's evidence of that has really gone on, that's a significant, I think, legal concern for the schools.
So the October 1st deadline is for funding, right? It's the students in the seats on October 1st, and then they get funded for the entire year. Is it possible to look at like rolling funding? So like every 6 weeks or every 2 months?
Yes,
you do
and I think that there is some of that in the works currently. I don't think, though, that that's going to solve the problem entirely, because what's happening is students who really aren't enrolled full-time, I mean, they don't take full-time credits, or they're using homeschool courses, which are not supposed to be paid for by the state. They're counting those people as enrolled anyway, and so I don't think that the rolling enrollment funding mechanism would solve the problem all by itself. There are going to be a lot of things that need to solve this problem. So, and you're right, charter schools, people who support charter schools don't like this.
Right.
They don't like this because it puts a bad image, it casts a shadow on all charters, on all online learning, and that's really unfortunate because they don't all do this.
Right, I agree. I think the vendors maybe are not happy with you.
No, I would imagine they're not.
So you must be doing something right, so way to go. Okay, talk to me about the Attorney General. Senator Todd Weiler has a bill about whether we appoint or elect the Attorney General. I know it's something that was talked about over the interim as things happened with John Swallow. So where is that bill right now?
Well, he circled it on the third reading calendar today, so I haven't spoken with him. I imagine that he recognizes it's maybe not likely that it will pass the Senate, so he circled it. We had a really long, healthy, robust debate on that bill on Friday afternoon. And, I voted aye on 2, which is a procedural vote in the Senate. We debate bills twice in the Senate. So the second reading calendar is the first time we actually debate a bill, and that's what we did Friday. And then you got to wait at least 24 hours before you go to the third reading calendar and debate the bill a third time, which would be final passage in the Senate. So we have a procedural vote in the Senate we can say aye on 2 or no on 2. If we say aye on 2, it means, all right, I'm going to vote to pass this bill to the third reading calendar, but that's my warning to the sponsor that I may be a no on final passage. I've got significant concerns with the bill. So that's what I did on Friday. I was an aye on 2. The reason I was an aye on 2 is because the bill doesn't make the change. The bill simply puts it on the ballot for the people of the state of Utah to vote whether or not they think the Attorney General should be appointed or elected.
It's a constitutional change.
Right.
And can you do it strictly through legislation, or does it have to be a constitutional change?
I think it has to be. Well, I don't know the answer to that question, honestly. But, over the weekend and thinking about what is the right course here, you don't change law, I don't think. You don't change a whole policy, a whole procedure because the law was broken.
Right.
If the law was broken or ethics were violated, then, you don't need to, that doesn't mean you scrap the whole system and change it. And so I have significant concerns there. And, if you've got the point that Senator Weiler made, and he's right, with having the Attorney General going out and raising a lot of money, potentially from people he may have to prosecute, that is a significant concern for me. However, you can't take politics out of politics. And if you've got an Attorney General who is beholden to the governor still has to go raise money from these same people. He may have some significant pushback on certain things. And the transparency just won't be there. I think the same problem will be there, but the transparency won't be. And so right now, if people aren't breaking the law or violating, the rules that they're supposed to engage in, we know who's given what to the Attorney General. But we would not know who would be giving, to the governor for the purpose of
selecting a specific Attorney General.
I mean, I think it puts a shroud of a little bit of a cloak of darkness over there, which I don't think we need right now. So I would have been no on third reading. I told the sponsor that, and he has circled the bill. I don't know that it'll get out of the Senate.
I think it's an interesting discussion, and I'm glad you guys had it. I think one of the things to look at is exactly what you pointed out, is you trade a set of problems for a different set of problems, and sometimes you get better and sometimes you get worse, actually. But bad circumstances sometimes make bad law, right? I
Right.
mean, you look at something bad that happens and you say, oh, we have to have a law for that, against that, for that, whatever it is. And that's not always the solution. I think in this case, it took a little while. And it's still working through the process legally with the former Attorney General.
Right.
But the process was there.
Right.
And I think it showed we were able to find some of the holes
Yes.
in the process, and those are being tightened up this session as far as reporting goes and what you need to report and your spouse needs to report, all those types of things. But the process worked also because there were violations that happened in campaign finance reporting. There were violations that happened, I think, potentially in other areas. He hasn't been charged with anything at this point, but I do believe that those are coming. And to hear the county attorneys tell it, they've got 3 to 6 more months at least of the investigation to go. And as they recovered information from the hard drive that John Swallow said was unrecoverable, they found 99% of it actually was recoverable, and 1,300 emails are responsive to the subpoenas that they issued. That's a whole bunch of data dump that the investigators just got now, too. And I think this week we actually have the report released, and I hear it's a book. So that's been something that, as you know, I've followed really closely for more than a year.
Yes.
So more than a year, and in
Everybody
fact,
knows, Holly.
no, you'd be surprised actually. So I have followed it closely, and it's been concerning, you know. And I was at a public meeting this weekend, and somebody asked the question to the legislators who were in the room, was it worth the money? And Senator Valentine stood up and said, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Every penny
Yes.
was worth that money, every
Yeah,
penny.
you can't put a price on public trust.
No.
You can't put a price on integrity. You know, we have to, if we don't do the self-policing, which
That's
is what
right.
we've done, then what do we have?
That's right.
You know, you allow mold and mildew to grow where there is, you know, a
Where it's
cloak of
dark
darkness.
and no sunshine. Yeah.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
I think the money absolutely was well spent. I think that everybody's had a wake-up call. Everybody has to reevaluate constantly, especially as, you know, legislators. We have to constantly be reevaluating our ethics and
Yeah.
our practices, because there may be some things that people do that are not good, that are not right, but they just do them because that's how it's always been done. It's how
Well,
everybody else does it.
that's
They just
what I
don't
was-
think
yeah.
about it. And so it's been really healthy on
Yeah.
a lot of fronts for us all to go, okay, let's just do an internal check here and make sure that the things that we're doing, you know, not just because it's the way it's always been done, but we're doing things that are actually right and good, and staying away from the things that smell bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, that was one of the first responses that I had when I started blogging about this issue, was people coming to me from within our own party saying, hey, this is how things are done. And I'm like, no, it's not.
If
This
it is, then we better
it's
change
not.
how
And
things
they're
are
like,
done.
and they're like, yeah, no, this is the way everybody does it. And I'm like, no, not in my world, and I would never be okay with this as the status quo. And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons I spoke up against it, is because this is not okay, right? And I think there was this, you get this covert assumption sometimes that this is the way things are, and yet at the same time, on that House Investigative Committee, one of the members of the committee at one of the latest meetings said, I did not know that this type of thing existed in Utah. I did not know that there was an underbelly of dark money that influenced Utah politics. Some people who'd been in the, you know, in the arena a little longer knew about dark money, but for this legislator, he was like, this is the first that I learned that there's, Representative McKell, this is the first I learned that there is dark money in the state, and this is not right.
Yeah, he talked to me about that feeling he had at that moment, and it was, you know, disbelief and shock and real disappointment.
Yeah.
It was a hard moment for him.
Yeah, to
from what he
realize,
says.
yeah.
But you know, that's when you're talking about ghost students or the Attorney General, or, you know, I had so many people say, well, you know, this individual is such a good person, they're honest, they have good intentions, or this system is good, we don't want to destroy it. So people can tend to want to look the other way based on a personality or something, but you know, it doesn't matter what the issue is. If something is wrong or violates ethics, you know, we ought to have the discussion. We ought to be talking about things and protecting a practice or a person in order to not have damage done to some other ancillary issue is never good practice. So it doesn't matter if they're Democrats, Republicans, you know, if you love charter schools, if you hate charter schools, you know, you need to look at what's right, and you need to say, okay, having integrity, having good morals and ethics, that's more important than anything.
Yeah, I agree. So we've talked, let's just wrap it up quickly, but we talked about your son in the show choir, which is awesome. Then we talked about two things that are a little bit of a downer. What's something good and positive that's happening at the legislature right now?
Well, I just, it depends on who you ask.
Well,
but
that's probably true.
I've just passed some transparency bills. I'm still trying to, go down this path of government transparency. I think that's a really healthy thing. As I've worked with the stakeholders, and not everybody's happy about government transparency. Of course, the agencies or the independent entities that are going to be subject to more scrutiny and transparency. It's never a fun thing, but I think that that's something that's really positive. Even as I've gotten a little bit of pushback from certain people, they understand and they get it. That sunlight is the best disinfectant. And there's this sentinel effect when I had a law enforcement transparency bill, and in committee, Senator Hilliard said, Senator Henderson, nobody ever looks at these. No one's going to look at these numbers. Should we put something in here to repeal the bill if only 100 people look at it in a year? And I said, well, look, transparency is not only important for the public, right, and for the citizens. It's really important for the agency or the people who are making those decisions.
Knowing that
exactly,
it's going to
knowing
be public.
that they're subject to scrutiny.
That's right.
And there's data all over the place that suggests that it's called the sentinel effect, that knowing that your outcomes are going to be measured and scrutinized actually it increases productivity, it increases outcomes, or it improves outcomes, and I mean, it's a positive effect all over the board. So those are some of the good things that we're working on in the legislature.
That's great. Well, thank you for joining us on Point, and we miss having you regularly. So get the session over with and come back.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, thank you again, and have a great week, everybody.